Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the kitchen and the Forging Agreement podcast. Last week we did empathy function, and we are now on to intuition function, which is the seventh function. And we're just going to jump in. And my name is Lisa, and sitting across from me is my dear friend and colleague, John Worthington. And before we begin, remember to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you know when our next video drops. All right, so let's jump in here.
Okay.
So, intuition function.
Mm-hmm.
And the tool for intuition function is direct knowing.
It is, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, which I found to be a bit of a challenge.
Really?
Yes, really.
Why?
Why? It's one of those things that I've always edited before anything came out of my mouth, instead of just saying what was there, you know? And it's been really interesting, the discussions we've been having about why me or anyone denies that they actually directly know.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that would be a great place to open the discussion.
Okay.
So can you talk about that, why people deny direct knowing?
Well, I suspect it's as different. It's as varied as there are people. But the reality is that we're told forever that we can't do that. We have to think before we speak and look before we leap and all that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And direct knowing doesn't really allow for that. The spirit, what you're doing is you're actually calling the spirit through direct knowing, and you're saying, okay, these are the things I know. Like, for instance, I know directly this is a coffee cup. I don't need you to explain me to it. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. I know when the sun's out. I know when it's not. I know when the moon's out. I know when the stars are out. I know when it's raining. I know when it's cold.
Yes, we do.
I know when it's warmer. Those are things I know directly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But there are other things like that too. There are things like everybody knows when somebody's mad. Everybody knows when somebody's happy.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows when somebody's doing something. They know directly. You don't have to explain it to them. They know directly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you acknowledge that, if you just come to grips with that idea, then what happens is that the function that we call intuition is funded. The energy for that function is funded. And that really is a matter of intuiting the body, mind, and spirit. But in particular, it's intuiting what exactly the spirit is requiring of us, what it's doing,
Mm-hmm.
what we need to be doing to stay in harmony with the spirit. Or in this particular quadrant, is to stay at one with the spirit.
Right, because B1 lives in intuition function on the playing field.
Right. It's somewhat related to specific function in a way, because they're both conscious and they're both referring to B1, because we have to be able to talk about what we see or what we know directly, and we have to be able to talk about what we intuit. Okay, so that means that we have to be at one with body, mind, and spirit in order to do that.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's like bringing up another subject there too, because intuition function unites all the functions. So B1.
Yeah, it does. Although it's a funny kind of uniting in a way. And look, you can't really be intuitive if you can't use your natural mind function, or you can't use do function, or if you can't use empathy function and so forth. Intuition function as a standalone idea probably is not going to work so very well. Okay, because it's more complicated than that. Look, when you write a program in the body, okay, you write a program and you start with a goal, and you say, okay, my goal is to go to this place. My goal is to pick up this thing. And what's the means, which is a step? And what's the charisma, which is a step? And what's the capacity, which is a step? What's the orientation, which is a step? What's the what do I have to eliminate? What do I have to assimilate? What do my impulses have to be? What do I need? What's the possibilities? What's the form? What's the substance? Those are all steps or parts of a program.
Right.
Okay. The Spirit expresses through us in those same kinds of parts. Although it's a holistic idea, it has identifiable parts that we can kind of iron out, because we're humans. We're not spirits, actually. We're spirits connected to us humans, but we're not that. We're a body and a mind. Okay, but the Spirit is also part of that body-mind idea, because without the Spirit, we pass away.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, so that's another thing too, is, years and years and years ago, it was like, all the self-help books and those types of things, and everybody's talking about, body, mind, and spirit, and it's like one of those things. It's like, oh yeah, I know what that is, but I'm finding out, not so much.
Yeah. Just because somebody can parrot something doesn't mean that they understand it.
Right.
Okay. That was something that took me years and years and years to work through for myself. Is that, I could talk to you and recite to you all kinds of ideas from the Bible, from, from Krzyzewski, from all kinds of places. But to actually put that to use, or to put that to work, required a different kind of abstraction altogether. Okay, and so it's like when that began to dawn on me, what that was really all about, it changed how I had to deal with the world. Okay, and so when somebody's talking to you about, I don't know, I call it the spiritual things. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they can't really show you that they really have that spiritual thing going on. You kind of have to stop and say, okay, well, what is that? Now, spiritual thing going on, the proof has to be in the pudding, as it were. Okay.
Yep, makes sense.
Okay, and so the proof, the pudding that brings about the proof is, can they really agree with anybody? You see, that's the next function that we're going to talk about, but you got to kind of bring it into this part here too, because that's the measure. I know lots of people who claim to be spiritual, but they can't agree with anybody unless you agree with them. Yeah, if you agree with them, then they say, "Oh yes, see, I'm right." Well, I don't mind that they're right. They're a pain in the ass with it, but I don't mind that particularly, because they don't know any better. Okay, to them they look like they're right, and in their mind they are right. And I if they ask me if they're right, I'm going to agree with it. I'll say, yeah, you're right. Okay, that doesn't mean I think that, but it means I will agree with them that they're right, because there's no reason to argue with them about it. Yeah. The way they think about things, they're right. That's as deep as they can go.
Which is fair.
I'm not mad about that. I don't think that I don't want to try to convince them to go deeper or anything else. If they're big enough to go deeper, then they should. If they're not big enough to go deeper, then they ought to leave it the fuck alone.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, there are lots and lots and lots of people who can tell you that they're empathetic, or they're intuitive, or they got all kinds of things that they can do, magical things and so forth. And I don't really find that that's really very true. I find that all these things are pretty practical. And so that's, I think, the reason why we call this set the practicality of the spirit, is because in reality, intuitive function or intuition function is a very practical matter.
Yeah, it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
because if you can intuit what the Spirit's doing, it's pretty practical to apply that to your life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so why are you where you are? For instance, there's people listening here that are bankers and lawyers, and all kinds of crazinesses. Okay, farmers and plumbers and who knows what all else. Restaurateurs and so forth. Okay,
Yeah.
waiters and probably bakers and
Candlestick makers.
all of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Indian chiefs maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, and so I think that's correct. I think they have to do that, and they have to have a specialized knowledge for them to do those things. But are they doing those things with the Spirit, or are they doing those things because that's who they are? There's those two ideas are different.
Right, because one is, they went to school, they did all this stuff, and it's like, this is, it's like they wear it like that's, their badge, or that's who they are, that's all they are.
Right.
It is like, even, I guess, even in a trade, I guess you could say that too. It's like, this is all that they are. It's like, and all this is something that I've had to like deal with and take apart too, is being a mom.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yes, I am a mom, but I'm more than a mom.
Well, you're a mom too.
Yeah, I think that's okay. A mom too. Yeah.
Let me explain it like this. When I was younger, I had the opportunity to work in the ER/OR of a small hospital. And because of that, because I was an orderly, I didn't have any particular medical training, but they let me work in the ER and the OR, mostly because I didn't handle Mr. Williams dying up on the floor one night to the next. And so they sent me down to the ER so I could get used to that kind of thing. And if you're in the ER, you also had to work in the OR because it went back and forth. Mm-hmm. There were two doctors that I remember from there, and they were both good doctors. One of them was an anesthesiologist. The other one was just a general practitioner, I think. But the difference between the two of them was how they cared about people. The general practitioner, it fell to him to take care of one of the nurse's kids from up on the floor. She left to go to work one afternoon, and when she got to the hospital, her 8-year-old kid was there already. He had pulled out behind her on his bicycle and got hit by a car.
Oh, wow.
And so this general practitioner doctor worked with this kid for hours and hours and hours. And at one point, I stuck my head in the room and I asked him, "What's the chances?" And he shook his head and he said, "There's not any." And he showed me, he took a syringe full of blood out of the kid's stomach because the kid was bleeding internally. The other doctor, well, he was kind of a callous sort of fella. One time in a hysterectomy, when a lady gets a hysterectomy, well, she's not clothed when she's on the operating table. And this doctor took the sheet off to look at her.
Wow.
Well, the general practitioner doctor wouldn't do that. Okay. And that's the difference between the spirit and just doing the job. The
Right.
general practitioner, he fought death. Sometimes he won, sometimes he didn't. But he fought. It was a battle for him. I like to see spiritual people who can fight battles.
Right, because that's the other part of what we're talking about here is that field of battle.
Yeah. You see, empathy function and intuition function are on the right side of the playing field. I'm sure you're going to put that in right here, yeah. And what those two functions are trying to do is they're trying to address specific function and natural mind function on the left side of the playing field. They're trying to communicate over there to those people. They're trying to listen to what those things are for somebody else. And those people are probably not as evolved. I'm going to use that word, although I doubt that it's actually an accurate word, but it will give you the idea. They're not as evolved as the people on the left side who can function from the left side or right side of the playing field. Because those people are going to be asking the people on the left side are going to be asking people on the right side for an agreement. They're going to say, I want to make something real. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's the nature of this entire conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so more often than not, you have to battle with those people on the other side for them to be able to do it, to do what they want to do. Okay, because that's the reason why they can't be empathetic, and that's the reason why they can't be intuitive, right. Because they can't really quite bring themselves to be brutally honest or to know directly. Mm-hmm. Okay, they just can't do that quite yet. It's not a matter that they're not going to, it's a matter that they can't do it yet. Mm-hmm. And so you have to fight with them about it. You have to say, well wait a second here. How are you different? Let's stop for a second here. Can you not do that thing that you're doing right there so that you can be able to actually accomplish something? And well, they're going to fight with you about that. They're going to say, well, who are you to tell me I can't do that? I'm not telling you that you can't do it. I'm asking you if you cannot do it.
Right. Yes. Two different things right there.
I'm not asking you, who are you to tell me what I have to do? I'm asking you if you know how you're different from anybody else or not. Yeah, I know you're smart. You got blonde hair. Okay, cool. But that doesn't mean anything. Differences are what's left.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so here we are over on this other side of the playing field where we're dealing with, well, last time we dealt with empathy function. This time we're dealing with intuition function. And the reality is that you have to be able to be intuitive. It's like this is the thing with those two doctors. The anesthesiologist, he wasn't intuitive about what he was doing with looking at the girl because she was under. Mm-hmm. She couldn't protect herself.
Yep.
But he was staring at her. He undressed her completely.
Wow. Yeah.
And the other guy, man, he just couldn't give up the fight.
Right. He was going to do everything he possibly could.
Yep.
And it was something, and this is something too that we've talked about is something or someone being that important that you'll fight until you can't fight anymore.
Yep. That's a measure of spirituality.
Yeah, that's And it's interesting too because intuition function is pulls everything together, and it's like it's like the you're grown.
Yeah. You have to be grown. You know, you can't be a kid about these things. You know, there's lots of kids that like to be, you know, I run into these guys that want to be shamans and they want to be, you know, I've heard people in classes tell me even that that's what they want to, they want to be a shaman. It's like, you don't want to be a shaman. Hell, you don't even know what it is. You know?
Yeah.
Or somebody tell me that they want to be a farmer. They lived on Market Street all their life. You know, come on, they don't want to be a farmer. You know, they don't know what that is. Okay. So this is the problem with intuition function, is that if you're really going to be intuitive, then you have to be able to see what this other person over here in front of you has to not do. And, you know, they're going to argue with you about that. And it's like, you can't blame them at all, even, because it makes sense. It makes sense to me that they don't want to not do that thing that they have to not do, because that's part of who they are. They've been doing that thing forever and a day.
Yeah, I can speak for myself here, is that, you know, that idea of not doing, I mean, that was a challenge to be able to go, okay, whoa, wait a minute, because that's the thing. It's like, unless...
Be fair with the folks. What was one of those things you had to not do?
Yeah, that whole poor me, and yes, and there's been there's been several of those things, but that was in my way.
You had to not do it.
Yeah.
But you couldn't use your natural mind functions unless you didn't do that.
No.
If you do that, then, you know, you're going to loop back around and do it again and again and again and again, and it'll make you sick.
Been there, done that. Yeah, I mean, seriously. And yeah, so that has, you know, that idea of not doing, and, you know.
Did you fight about it?
Oh, fuck yeah.
Did you?
Yes.
I never noticed that.
Yeah, right. The daggers across the room.
If looks could kill, I'd be dead.
That was kind of the whole point I was like going for here. It's like, yeah, I mean, shit, you know, I fought tooth and nail for that, you know,
okay.
For that.
You see, the first battle you have to fight with on this right side of the playing field is the battle in yourself.
Yep. And that's something else as we've been going through intuition function, you know, it's like, oh yeah, you know, the field itself is a battle, but there's also an internal battle.
Well, there is one. Yeah. You know, let me, because there are people that are going to argue right here, okay? And okay.
So, yep, go for it.
There's a story that everybody probably should know about. You know, the week before Jesus was crucified, according to the Gospels, what he did was he went to the temple and he went in there and he upset all the tables for the money changers. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm pretty sure that he didn't go over and say, "Excuse me, let me turn this over." I'm pretty sure he went in there and said, "The hell are you sons of bitches doing?" And he grabbed that table and he threw it over there and he said, "You the same way," and went screaming and yelling and carrying on through the temple, upsetting those apples, you know. And I don't want to be prejudiced, but these are Jewish people, and they were making money, you know. And so, well, you know, some things don't change much. I mean, I'm not saying that as a generality, but in a general way, that's the hype that you hear about Jewish people. And so, where there's smoke, there's probably some degree of fire. Okay, so there he was running around through the temple of all places, upsetting money changing. There they were trying to change, I don't know, rubles into dollars or some damn thing. I don't know what they were doing. Pesos into pesitos or to yen or something. And so, there he was upsetting all of it, and there was money right all over the floor. Everybody saying, "That's mine." No, it's not. It's mine. And so he caused a hullabaloo in there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not peaceful and spiritual, is it?
No.
But it's a battle that's spiritual.
Yep. And that's really the difference, because I look at where I was 20, 30 years ago, and just call it New Age. It was like how I got. Yeah, all of it, meditation, the whole bit. Reading every book I could get my hands on because I was looking for something.
Yep. And there's a lot of people doing that. They're right. You had to go through all those steps.
Yeah.
I had to go through steps like that.
Yep. And what it did, though, is it gave me a foundation to actually be able to sit here today. But I also had to look at those things and go, well, wait a minute. The way these things, ideas were talked about were not
or the way that you understood them.
True.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Let's be fair about this. Okay. We don't want to talk about it from. I don't want to talk about it from the standpoint that people are wrong the way they explain these things. I want to talk about that we perceive things in a screwy way.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Which is the reason why we have to move to direct knowing. See, rather than perceiving it, we have to know directly. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't perceive things, because we do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But when we perceive things, do we know directly what it means or what it is? There's a point in time where we do. For instance, I read a story the other day about this lady who was adopted, and I can't remember. She was from the Far East. I think she was probably from China, if I'm not mistaken. And her mother had from Taiwan, I think, and her birth mother had taken her wrapped her up in a blanket and put her in a basket and left her in a stairwell. And so the police came and took her to an orphanage. And this couple in the United States adopted her, a Chinese couple from the Midwest yet. But the mother had this Chinese stigma that if you don't have children, you're not much of a woman. And so she couldn't ever admit to anybody that she had adopted the little girl. And the little girl couldn't ever say that to anybody, because even though she knew, in the family she couldn't say that she was adopted. Well, that's a hell of a story there. Now, here's somebody that knows something about themselves they can't say to anybody. They can't even think about it out loud because it's against the family rules. So how much of that direct knowing does she cut off for herself? How much of her natural mind could she cut off for herself? And so finally not in her dotage, but in her older age, like in her 40s, I think, she came to grips with the idea that, this family secret I've carried all this time really isn't worth anything. It's not really, it's no big thing. So I was adopted. That my parents should be lauded for that, not they shouldn't feel guilty about it.
Right.
Now, for her to tell that to her mother, I'll guarantee you it would be a fight. It would be a royal battle.
Right, because of how her mom has thought about that.
That's right, because her mother couldn't possibly agree, or couldn't possibly come to the point of saying, okay, I see, you're right, that doesn't make sense. The mother would have to protect herself from what she would be sure would be some kind of social ostracification or something. It just can't. That just can't be. Okay. Now, you run into this in all kinds of ways. You know, people talk about, that's my private business.
Yeah.
Wow. To whom?
Right. Because everybody can see what you're doing, and
Right.
Yeah. A private.
So private probably isn't what it's cracked up to be. Okay, let's put it that way.
Yep.
Okay, so rather than protect your private business, wouldn't it be better to know directly what's going on around you?
Yes, it would.
Okay. That way, ooh, I got the sneezies. That way, you'd be able to, let's say, intuit what the Spirit's trying to get you to understand. See, you could be like the doctor, the general practitioner doctor. You could be fighting for the life of a kid. You'd be fighting against death. I think that's the real battle that we all have to fight here. That we have to make the life count, and to do that, we can't roll over and pee in the air like a little puppy dog that's scared of you or something. You got to fight you got to fight against death. You got to hold it off. You got to say no. You know, I got to live to the fullest as long as I dare to, as long as I can, until my body just flat gives up. Okay.
Yep.
Well.
Yep.
That means you have to fight for the people around you. Not fight with.
Fight for.
Fight for.
Yeah.
If you're fighting with, you're a silly shit. If you're fighting for, that's a different story altogether. Now, the people that you're fighting for probably can't tell the difference whether you're fighting for them or fighting with them. I mean, what parent hasn't gone through this thing of fighting for their kid, and the kid being all sure that what they're doing is fighting with them?
I know a little bit about that.
Yes. You had some experience with that?
Yes. With my daughter. Yep.
Yeah. Not with your son, though.
A little bit there, but
okay.
Okay too.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that happens, you know, because they can't see when they're over here trying to use their natural mind or specific function. They can't see that you're fighting for them. They can't.
Yeah, it makes sense. You know, until they kind of reach that point of like, well, and I've had it happen. Of like, oh shit, no, wait a minute. You know what? I could reevaluate.
Yeah.
I'm looking at.
Well, this is one of the problems here, is that we have a tendency to say things, but not to communicate information. Okay, remember due function? Due function has to exist between, the people over on this left side over here. Their due is located over here between empathy function and intuition function. And whatever they do has to be met with those two functions. And that's where the battle takes place. That's the reason why the battle, that's the spark that puts the battle in motion. Because what they're doing isn't fitting right. And somebody with more experience, more time in the world will say, that isn't going to work. So when I hear people saying silly things like, well, I just agree to disagree. I want to slap them.
Yeah.
Because that's telling them that they're never, ever, ever going to do what they have to get done in life. Not ever. Now, I've mentioned this before, I think, but, the definition of stupid is somebody who destroys stuff for no benefit to themselves. And that statement is probably the epitome of stupidity, therefore.
Yeah.
Because
I would
that's going to
say so.
destroy whatever it's about. It's going to destroy the relationship. Not that moment, but it's going to destroy it sooner or later. And not only is it going to destroy it sooner or later, what else is going to happen is that it's going to keep them from ever getting anything done that makes a difference or has any substance. They're always going to be that doctor lifting the sheet up to look at that poor naked girl.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, I know the other thing we've talked about is we can see it. We can see that exact same thing going on in the United States. Like,
You can see that exact same thing going on any place in the world.
true, Russia and Ukraine at the moment.
Well, Africa and China and Australia and England and Germany and France and Hungary and Brazil probably, Argentina and Chile maybe, Uruguay, who knows?
Yeah, yeah,
And I mean, it's just there. Now, this is the problem: is that we have to have another way of thinking about these things. And this is it's not the only other way, but this is another way.
mm-hmm.
Okay, to think about things from what the Spirit's doing for us, through us. It's the same thing as my iPad. If I consider myself to be an iPad, okay, just unfold me and I'm ready to go. Face recognition, I'm on. If I think about myself that way, then the user is the Spirit.
Yep.
I don't care what my iPad does. It's a good little computer. It does all. It has its own life, and I'm just as happy as a clam. And so I'm glad that it does that actually. Mm-hmm. But every now and then I need it to do something. But here's the thing: I live in a different dimension than what my iPad does.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a dimension of thought that it doesn't have.
Yep.
Okay. Now, that same thing is true for the Spirit. It doesn't necessarily live in the third dimension or in the three dimensions. It may live in the fourth or the fifth or the 11th or the 13th or something.
Yeah, it's like, yeah.
Okay, it doesn't live in the three dimensions. The same way that my iPad doesn't live in the same thought dimensions that I live in. I mean, it's a three-dimensional object, but it doesn't have the dimensional thought that I have. It doesn't have the ability to learn how to learn. Now, there's some AI that's getting to that already.
Yeah, we have a little bit of that going on.
And I think, like Stephen Hawking said, that's kind of a frightening idea.
Yeah.
Because, you start listening to some of these conversations that computers have between themselves. They're not really fond of humans, I guess.
Yeah.
So the thing is that the only way that we're going to combat that is we can't combat that with consciousness. Okay, we have to combat that with our strength, and our strength is our spirituality. But in order to combat that with our strength, with that spirituality strength, we have to know what those strengths are. And a place to start is with the functions here. We've in the Office of Shaman, I've outlined 8 of those functions. Mm-hmm. Okay, I haven't explained them all the way through. That's for damn sure. But it's a start. And I'm sure there's going to be people that are smarter than me that are going to be able to take those functions and do things with them that I've never been able to do. But that's where we have to start with. We have to start with what we've got. And we're late in getting started now. We really need to be on the move.
Yeah.
We don't want to be the Donner Party, do we?
No. Yeah. asses in gear.
Well, you need to get to Carson City on time then.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I mean, why anybody would want to stay in Carson City is beyond my imagination.
Yeah.
It's a lovely place, but I wouldn't want to live there. Of course, Donner Pass is a lovely place too. I wouldn't want to live there either.
Yeah, no.
I don't mind staying there for a while. It's good skiing. But
Anyway.
that's not the point here. The point is this, is that, we have to do something for ourselves. And that thing that we have to do has to do with this concept of being intuitive about what the spirit itself is accomplishing or trying to accomplish, not only with us, but with everybody around us. For those of you who are curious about these things, there's any number of reincarnation stories on YouTube and I don't know, Facebook and wherever else you want to look. There's lots of them.
Yeah.
And some of them correlate. A lot of those videos talk about the same people. And these are historical people. These are people that there are case studies on some of these people that they do remember. What they remember is pretty compelling. Like the little boy who remembered being shot down in World War II, and he went to visit the people that were on the ship with him, and they all swore and be damned that he knew what was going on, because he was talking about stuff that only somebody who's there could have known.
Yep.
So they were convinced. There's a couple stories of girls in India that were reincarnated. A young boy in Syria that was reincarnated because went back to his village and went to his wife's house and said, "Hi, you're my wife, and my neighbor. You killed me when you killed me with an axe, and I know where you buried the body, and I know where you put the axe." And so he took him and they dug up the body, and sure enough, and he said, "The axe is right over there." And the guy said, "Okay, I give." I guess he was freaked out.
Maybe I would think a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
He thought he'd gotten away with it until some kid from someplace else came and said, "Hi, you killed me."
Fuck. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, you see, the body was buried. And the mind was buried with the body, okay, the brain and all that. So what was left to remember that was the spirit. Now, these functions are, shall we say, positions of how to assemble the world.
Mm-hmm.
And if you assemble the world in that same way, you'll have those same memories. And so the spirit has that ability. Now, for most of us, the Spirit's saying, don't do that. Leave it alone. just leave it alone. No, you fucked it up. That's the reason why you're back again. It's not to get even with anybody. It's just you were a fuck up. That's it. And so you're not a Dalai Lama, you're not a Buddhist monk or any of those kinds of things. You're just a regular old folk, right? For all those of you who are Cleopatras and Napoleons and so forth, God love you. I'm happy for you.
Little Northeast PA love.
Yeah, there you go. So, these are not bad things or these are not good things. They're just things. And if you're going to bale hay, you got to wait till it gets to a certain state of dryness.
Yep.
Okay, that's a fact. Okay, and how do you know that? You go out there and you look at it, and you pick it up, you chew it in your mouth, you chew it, and you say, "Okay, it's ready." Okay, or no, not yet. Okay, how do you know? You know it directly. Okay. You have some experience, yeah, you do, but there's not a measurement for it. You can't go out there and stick a sensor in it. I suppose you could that these days, but when I was a kid, you couldn't.
Yeah.
You have to go out there and just look at it. and pick it up and feel of it, see if it feels wet or not. Then you could bail it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's just all manners of things that we know directly, and that knowing directly funds the expression of the other through, or the spirit through intuition function.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
All right. Now, what else do you want me to talk to you about?
Let's see.
Explain you to.
I think we might have actually covered quite a bit of this.
Well, I still have coffee, so we couldn't have.
Yeah, we got about 10 more minutes. Well, one of the other things, and maybe it was just something that one of our discussions, like, and you kind of touched on this of like the measure that you have of how well someone intuits the dictates of the other, or the spirit. And I think you kind of touched on that, where people get upset with you when they're on the left side of the playing field. It's just like...
Yeah. I knew this lady once that wrote self-help books, and she's a nice lady. Really and truly, she's a nice lady. And she wrote, and there's no doubt that the books help people to help themselves and all that kind of stuff. And they were probably stepping stone books and that kind of stuff. But, she couldn't really bring herself to do any of the functions. She just couldn't do it. She did other things, but she couldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so when I talked to her about it, I'd say, well, there's B1 function, there's harmony function, and you got to move your assemblage point to. She couldn't wrap her mind around that. And whenever I push on her a little bit, she'd get pissed off. I mean, she didn't get pissed off, she got pissed off. Pissed off. And so I had to come to the point where I had to say, well, I don't think that she's very spiritual, really. I mean, she'd been to some kind of classes that gave her an end to being some kind of shaman or something. I don't know what the hell that was about. But she couldn't really do the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she claimed that she could. I mean, all those people that went to that class, they all claimed that they could do it.
Right. Yeah.
They all said, well, we can cure cancer, and we can make it rain over there and over here. And I didn't see that they could do that, because the lady that they claimed they could cure cancer died of cancer, so it was not much of a cure.
No.
Could have been that radiation she was taking had something to do with remission. I don't know. But they said it was them, so
Right.
I wasn't there, so I don't know. But I do know the lady died.
Yeah. Yep, she did.
Well, that's not a good sign for you or your magical powers,
Yeah.
But those people were pretty much convinced that that was something that actually happened for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I still can't back that. I just can't. It's not, to begin with, it's not a practical thing. They couldn't repeat it.
Mm-mm.
They couldn't do it on demand. So how practical was it?
Not practical.
Well, then, if it's not practical, it probably it didn't have anything to do with the spirit either.
No.
Because see, I'm really convinced that the spirit resides in and lives in practicality.
Yes, and it's like, and this is something too I've kind of been thinking about as we've had our, we've been discussing
discussions.
discussions.
Not arguments.
Very powerful. Our discussions, it's like you can, like you've used the example of farming, and like you have a farmer who lives off the land and has to take care of his family and takes care of the community on top of that. Like, you can look at that and see that practicality of spirit.
Mm-hmm.
People who entrepreneurs, like, who have their business, they create this business from two people sitting like down at Denny's, and
I think Steve Jobs and his buddies started off in a garage.
exactly. And look at what they created.
Well, and it was a pretty practical idea, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
How about those apples?
And you're so funny.
That was a dad joke. I'm a dad, I can do that.
And even and then this is really what I love about Apple, is even how they talk about their products or advertise their products. It's not about, hey, buy this Apple computer. Here's why we do what we do. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's practicality of spirit. It's
Right.
infused with it.
Right. Well, that's what these stories are all about. It's the why I have to be where I am.
Yep.
Because I've seen the practicality of the spirit.
Yep. And it's the thing too, it's like, it's getting to that place where, one, you acknowledge spirit and acknowledge spirit working in your life.
Well, let's say that's a kind of logically practical idea for me.
Yeah.
It's not some
Nope.
the lie. I mean, it's all that stuff is cute, and it feels good for the people that do it. I'm glad that they're doing that. Keeps them out of the pool halls.
Well, true. And I mean, too, like you said, it's like they're stepping stones. It's like, I took those stepping stones.
Sure.
But
You have to be, well, because you don't come with that all downloaded out of childhood. You got to download it yourself, and it takes, those upgrades take time to download and be integrated.
Yep. And I mean, it's taken me time to even, like, finally, be here. And it's like, okay, you know what? This is I gotta do this. I've gotta finish what I started.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I think you actually said, actually sit down and listen. It's like, yep.
Well, for people that want to actually learn things, I can't tell you what you should do. I can't tell you, in fact, I can't tell you much of anything, but I can ask you questions about whether or not you're expressing at the best of your ability. And if you lie to me, I can ask you about that and say, well, what really? Can you show me that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, I understand that just pisses people off no end. I got it. It pissed me off when somebody told me that kind of stuff. I got pissed off as I could be about it. So I'd expect that other people are going to be the same way. But, if you're serious, then you have to sit down with somebody who can piss you off about that stuff, I think.
Yes.
Okay? Because, when you get pissed off, and I said, what is that about?
What the hell? Yeah, it's like, really, and it is, and it's like we said earlier, it's really been that internal battle to be able to pull those things up, whatever it was, whether
Right.
it's the poor me's or the lone wolf, or like whatever that has been for me, and like that idea of ironing it out. It's like looking at it, and it's like, hey, you know what? It's just in the way. I got to do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But it's invaluable.
Well, yeah, but only if you can acknowledge your own value. See, that's the problem, is that the people on the left side of the playing field quite often can't see their own value. And so you kind of have to fight with them about it so they can see it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, because, they don't understand that some of the things that they do kind of shoot them in the foot. They can't see that because they think that what they're doing is exactly the right thing. Okay, nobody gets up and says, well, I'm going to be an ass today.
True. Yeah.
Well, there's a couple of guys I know that
I
do
don't
that.
know, maybe they thought it through. I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
Premeditated. Who knows?
yeah, they're premeditated asses. But for the most part, people don't do that. Okay, people
Right.
say, no, I'm going to do the best I can today.
Mm-hmm.
Now, sometimes they get up and they say, okay, that's the best I'm going to do today, and they're done. And the other times, people get up and they say, okay, I'm just getting started, and they go about their day and they accomplish miraculous things. But those people aren't worried, that do the miraculous things, aren't worried about their value. They're not worried about whether they can. They're not worried about whether they should. They're not worried about whether mom's going to approve. They're not worried about whether the boss will fire them. They're not worried about whether their career will continue.
Yeah.
Those people are saying, I've only got this one life that I'm going to live, and I'm going to live this life. See, that's part of intuition as well, is knowing what your life is going to bring for you. Knowing that what your life is what you're here to do. That's the Spirit working in you. And you have to understand that. You have to see, you have to be able to intuit what the Spirit's doing. And, that one life that we have, it's a pretty good life if you want to use it. Of course, if you want to whine about it, say, I got this life. Then you get what you deserve. I don't mind that you get that. I don't mind at all I don't mind if you're successful. I don't mind if you're not successful.
Mm-hmm.
Both things are the same as far as I'm concerned. Because if you don't get it right this time, well, you come back and do it again until you get it right. And when you can begin to control the coincidences, when you can begin to say, okay, I can bring my energies to bear to control coincidences around me and in my life and in lives of maybe even other people, so that they can earn a living and they can have a better standard of living and they can feel better about themselves and they're not all those kinds of things. Then you're being intuitive.
Hmm. Yep, that is true, and I think that speaks volumes of the differences between, that acknowledgement of Spirit in our life,
Right.
and the denying of Spirit.
Well, anybody can say, I don't believe that shit. Okay.
Right.
That doesn't cost anything at all except your life.
Well, that's the thing too, it's just like, yeah, that's talking from experience, that's a heavy cost.
Well, it is. People will look at what you're saying here and they'll say, well, but you're alive.
Yeah, but I've had to actually fight my way through that.
See, that's the question.
See, that is the question. Denying Spirit.
Okay, so you're telling me that you actually denied that you're alive?
For a long time, I think I
Well, if you're not alive, then what are you?
Well, let's back that up because,
Well, no, answer that. If you're not alive, then what are you?
I don't know. I think you can be I don't know.
You don't know what you'd be when you're not alive?
Well, you'd be dead, but back to the fact.
Stop.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, that's right. That's exactly what you were doing, is that you were dying, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
Okay, because you didn't want to accept the very essence of your own life.
Yes.
You wanted to argue with it and fight with it and say, no, I don't want to.
Yeah, I did.
Oh.
Yeah, did 3 years of that, and
3 years.
Well, I did a lot more, but it caught up to me.
I think it started way earlier than 3 years ago.
Well, yeah, it did.
Okay, just to keep things straight.
Yeah, it did.
Okay. So what else you got?
I think that's. Well, I mean, the other thing I have in here is about communication emanating from spirit.
Well, yeah. You know, in the brain, what Lilly says is this. He says, you know, the self-metaprogrammer works directly only on the metaprograms.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the operating system only works on those few programs like, well, it only works on a few programs like telephony and graphics and word processing and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
It only works on those. Those programs work directly, or those metaprograms work directly on the programs or the applications that's all in your phone there.
Mm-hmm.
And the applications work on what takes place on your screen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if we take that back another step, then the self-metaprogrammer, the supra self-metaprogrammer works only on the self-metaprogrammer.
Yep.
Okay, so a communication has to begin with the supra self-metaprogrammer. Okay, if it's going to be information.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, otherwise it's not going to be a communication. It's not really going to do much.
That's the point.
That's the point. Okay. And if you look at real live honest to God communications, they have to be spirit based. Einstein is a perfectly good example of that. You know, Mark Twain is a perfectly good example of that. Hemingway is a perfectly good example. Longfellow. Those are all perfectly good examples of communications that are based in a spiritual concept.
Mm-hmm.
Did they understand all this? I don't know. I don't care. I don't think they had to.
Right.
Did they do all of it? Oh yeah, they did it all.
Yep.
You know, did they understand how it all worked? Probably not. Or maybe they did. I don't, but probably not. They didn't talk about it, so they probably didn't really understand it that way. But that doesn't mean that they didn't do it. I mean, Henry Ford, I mean, you know, damn, I mean, the guy understood something. He had a dream about how to get things done. And you know, we have automobiles that work right now because of that guy.
Yep.
Okay. You know, there have been a lot of people throughout history that did those kinds of things, from Socrates to Henry Ford, I guess, if you'd like to do it that way. To what's the name of the fellow that invented peanut butter and all those other kinds of things? George Washington Carver. Carver, I think.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, something like, I can't remember his name at the moment. But you know, those are all people who just made a huge difference. The Beatles.
That's a great example. Yeah.
Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stone. I mean, you know, the Beatles presented one side of that equation, and the Rolling Stone another.
Yep.
You know, the Grateful Dead. You know, I mean, Jerry Garcia played in the Grateful Dead, and he also played with David Grissom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's a pretty widespread there.
Yes.
But in both of them, you know, he did something that nobody else was doing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yep. And I mean, you know, the people, I mean, look at what they call the fans were deadheads or something. I mean,
Right.
like you can still go buy merch, you
Mhm.
know, and it's just like, yeah, I mean, what they brought, it's still living on.
Yeah, it is. ZZ Top did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Look, here's the thing. there are people in history that have changed history because of expression of the spirits, things that they intuited. Okay, they intuited how to express the spirit. They intuited the design of the spirit, and they knew that directly. Nobody could explain it to them. Nobody could tell them how that was done. They just had to do it. And I think that's true for a lot of people that are just too scared to live life that way. And I think that we're beginning to see lots of people who are looking for that, because boy, there's a lot of people just up and quitting their job, saying, I don't want to do this. I don't know what I want to do, but I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And I think that what they're trying to do is, I think they're trying to find a way to talk about and to express how the spirits is directing them to express themselves. The communication that they need, but maybe they just need some tools.
Yeah, really. Because a lot of that, most of that happened during, the lockdowns, when people had that, time to think about things.
Well, not only that, but people had to be scared about a lot of things too.
Sure.
I mean, during that lockdown time, one of the things that was true for me, and I think it's probably true for a lot of people, is that you had to think about going to the store.
Absolutely. I literally planned it out 2 weeks apart and get in and get out.
Well, yeah, not only that, but you had to think about how to. There for a while, we didn't know how the virus worked, and so we had to wipe down all the groceries we brought them in, and all kinds of stuff, right?
Yep.
So those are all pretty bad things that we had to do, and I think everybody had to stop and look at their own mortality.
Yeah.
Because people all around them were dying.
Yeah.
Grandmas and people, not just old people, but young people and middle-aged people all around them were dying. I know a lady that her grandfather went to the hospital with COVID, and 2 uncles went to take care of him. And he survived, and they didn't.
They didn't, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of those stories, very similar. Whole families, because I was in PA at the time, and I remember reading stories in New Jersey, like whole families, and like 2 survived.
Yeah. Well, you see, I think that made everybody have to stop and think about what the spirit means to them. And I think that for us to all to pretend as though it's business as usual, or we're going to go back to normal, is a crazy idea.
Yeah.
Normal has gone away. Whatever normal used to be.
Whatever that was,
it's no longer here, because what's normal now is for people to think about other things. And I think that's really where we are in the world at this point. So if that happens to be you, well, then maybe we can help. I don't know. I'm hoping that we can. I think we can. That's the reason why we're doing this, is so that you can get a hand with what it is you're looking for. Okay?
Yep. And I think that's probably a great place to wrap this up.
Well, I'm not going to talk anymore.
Okay.
Even though I still have coffee, I'm not going to talk anymore.
Yeah.
I promise.
I think it was a great session, and thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode on agreement function. And remember to subscribe and hit that notification bell icon so you know when our next video is coming out. Please comment and share. We'd love to hear from folks. Find us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and John is also doing blogs on medium.com. So until next time, folks.
See you later.